My new book, Pillars for Life, A Guide to Spiritual Ethics and Practice, is now out and available for you to read and purchase. You can check out our website, willowhealing.org, to find a link, or you can find it on Amazon. We look forward to getting your feedback, and if you love it, please leave a review and share with your friends. Now it's time for the show. Welcome to Willow Healing Matters, the podcast. We are so excited to have you joining us on this journey where we explore different ways to empower your soul, whether it's healing in your kitchen or all the way up in the corporate world. Come with us as we look into different ways to heal your mind, body, and soul. Hey everyone, it's Catherine Cristani with another episode of Willow Healing Matters, and today I am joined by Mr. Whiskey. He is a US Navy veteran, a podcaster, a comedian, author, a dog dad, a modern day preacher, a speaker, and more. He is the founder of A Couple of Nukes, which focus on self-improvement, community building, and serving others, all through podcasting, writing, comedy, connection, and speaking. So a big welcome to the show, Mr. Whiskey.
Yes, of course, Ms. Cristani. Thank you so much for having me here. And a shout out to Pete from Pete versus Anxiety. He told me to connect with you here, and this is courtesy of him. So, Pete, brother, giving you some love.
He'll be so happy to hear that. I'm going to text him after we get off the call because he always asks, "Did you talk about me? Did you talk about me?" Yes, Pete, we're talking about you.
I hope his ears are
Well,
ringing right now.
possibly. I'll check my phone later. He might have been like, "Were you talking about me?" So thank you so much for joining me. So I guess you've had a little bit of a journey being in the Navy and then coming out to doing podcasting, community work, and everything like that. How did that evolve for you? Where did that kind of come from?
Oh, yeah. I wish I knew the answer to that myself. It is one of those things, one of those moments where you can trace it back, trace it back, trace it back. And it's so many little things all lined up so perfectly, and it really does go back to a single conversation. I'm still working on the elevator pitch of Couple of Nukes, so to speak, as far as the origin story. But essentially, I was commuting long hours in the military and about 16 hours a weekend. And I said, okay, I can only listen to so much music and I need to do something else. And I was like, I don't want to watch YouTube. And I found this audio only platform called podcasting. And so I started listening to podcasts. And that kind of put a background in my head for when I was with A Couple of Nukes. See what I did there? That's where the show title came from, was A Couple of Nukes. And basically that means nuclear operators. That's the shorthand for nuclear operators in the Navy. They call us nukes. you know, we were sitting around having super, super intelligent but strange conversations. We are so unique in our personalities. Like, there's different types of nukes, and they all have their own little, quirks and sets. And so I was like, a show about a couple of nukes would be super unique, and it would be life advice and comedy. The problem is, I always jokingly call it just a nuke because it's just me. There are no other nukes who are interested or involved. And when I left that community, I especially lost ties to it. This is a very hard community to do anything with because a lot of them turn to excessive alcohol abuse or excessive sleep to kind of deal with the high stress demand and high suicide rate of that job in the Navy. And so my show kind of branched out to military mental health while I was looking for some nuclear co-hosts, which I never found. And I kind of gave up on looking for it. I kind of got used to the solo just a nuke lifestyle. And so, at some point I got boxed and niched down to just military mental health. Everyone knew me as Mr. Whiskey, that veteran guy, and this and that. And that's not what I wanted to be. I did not want my life to be, and again, I have a lot of respect for the men and women who serve, not just my military, but all militaries, and it's a hard lifestyle, a lot of sacrifice. And even the non-combat roles have so many, selfless sacrifices that don't get acknowledged. But that's not what I wanted my life to be. I still serve those people. I have a lot of veterans on my show. I have a lot of resources for veterans on my website, but it's not all I want to be. I want to help more than just veterans. I want to help, everyone, so to speak, Obviously, we all say that we want to help everyone with our show, but that's really what it was, and that's really how it brought it out to what it is now, where not every episode is for everyone, but everyone has an episode for them.
I love that, and I love that, almost your way of coping with the stress was to find the humor in life again, I wanna say. Because so often life can be so serious, and I've had some incredibly serious conversations on this show, especially, um, with other veterans, talking about mental health, especially because there is a lack of mental health care. I know especially in America, to help veterans, especially if you've been through whatever trauma that gets thrown at you, and there's just this lack of follow-up and support and care afterwards, and I really admire, Mr. Whiskey, how you've channeled that into, putting it into this podcast that now you can actually allow people to share their story and do some healing on their own by sharing what's happened so that then people can take that and work that into their life.
For sure. And, humor is one of the ways I do that. And I've, guested on shows solely on the topic of the integration of humor in military life and why dark humor plays such a big role in the lives of military members. And yeah, I agree. There's a lot of public front, I'll say, with mental health resources in America. Like everywhere you turn, people are talking about mental health in America now, but it's very, I want to say shallow almost, where they say, hey, here are these resources and they have these appointments, but it doesn't feel, at least from my personal experience, it's not very individualized. And it's a lot of, at least what I found military side, it's a lot of you have to push, push, push. They won't dig at all. I mean, I've had doctor's appointments that lasted 10 minutes, 5 minutes, and he's looking at my medical record and seeing all these issues and past appointments I've had and doesn't ask about them at all. It's kind of like they don't ask, you have to tell. And it shouldn't be that way. When you go to the doctors, especially if you have a medical record that says you've had past appointments for mental health or whatever it is, they should say, hey, how are you doing? Has whatever it may be for you, has your depression changed at all? Has your anxiety changed at all? Typically, what they do is just this scale system of questions. I'm not sure how it works, over where you are, but they have like on a scale of 1 to 10. Do you have little or a lot of pleasure in doing the things that you normally like doing? Your sleeping habits, all this stuff, all these basic questions, and they kind of just like score you like you're a scantron, like a test, and then they assess your mental health from there. So they'll be like, oh, you didn't score high enough in the PTSD section, so you're not gonna, get help in this section, but you did score high enough in the anxiety section, so therefore, yeah, we can give you some resources for that. And it's like it shouldn't be a score. And I think the PTSD conversation, military wise, is very combat focused rather than non-combat PTSD and trauma focused, which is so important because I think they say only 8%. I'm not sure about the numbers, so don't quote me on that. But like the amount of people in the military who are actively combat deployed and dealing with that is very minuscule. Now, what they do is very important, and they definitely have trauma to a emphasized degree. But there's a lot of just lifestyle based trauma that doesn't get dealt with properly.
Mm. And it's almost that integration, right? I had another guest on the show, a few episodes, well, not a few episodes ago, and a few months ago, and he was saying it's more um, when you're in service, it's actually quite easy because you've got your mission, you've got your objectives, you've got your role, you know what you have to do. It's when you go back in society, it's the little things that trigger you. So he said one of his biggest triggers was his phone. Like his phone would start ringing, and like all these messages would come through or whatever it might be. And he was saying that that's what actually he found harder coming back into society. So he wasn't he did have kind of trauma in that regard, but no one actually talks about that integration back into society and what that looks like too.
Yeah. Yeah. I've addressed that a lot on my show. And most of the suicides happen, before or after deployment. And that's one of the strange things, that we've always discussed. Some of the combat veterans that I've talked to, it kind of irks them that the people they served with took their lives years later after they had survived the combat. They said we went
Mm.
out into this hostile land where people were actively trying to kill us with mortar fire, with sniper rifles, all this stuff happening, and they survive that, and then years later take their own life, kind of out of nowhere, it seems, because I have guys on my show who, their squadron or platoon or whatever it was for their branch, kind of dropped over time, and it's strange because there's no pattern, there's no like this or that. Oftentimes there's not a note, so it's like, what was it? And I think that is even more difficult when you were there with them and you went through that combat situation. And it's like, you know, how did you experience it so differently than me that you ended up taking your life? Or maybe it's not even related to the trauma. Maybe it was something afterward. And if so, what could it be that was worse than what we went through when we were in combat? But a lot of it, that I have found through my show has been identity, and
Mm.
the estrangement from the civilian world, even for people who were in for just a few years. It really is set up where you become so estranged from the civilian world pretty easily.
Yeah, and I guess it's where you come out of those things and you come back that you question who you are. And I guess that's where that my other guest was saying too, like it's like the coming back to society's the hard part because all of a sudden it's like where do I fit in and where does my identity, come in and that sort of thing. And um I think it's really, really powerful perspective you shared is that, it's like, well, who am I? And we're always questioning that. But when you've been given such a role in such a high traumatic environment, if you will, like, it can be really difficult then to come back and not have that stress, but then your body doesn't know how to function without that stress either because it's being conditioned to be in that stress all the time. So, you know, for me personally, I wasn't in the military, but I was in a really high pressure company that I created that environment for myself, but it took me over 2 years to actually accept I didn't have to fill my calendar and be multitasking every time, every step of the day, because that was the identity that I was so used to, but that was the stress my system needed to keep going as well. So it's almost like this deconditioning that happens, and you have to learn how to shift your energy as much as your mindset because you are stepping into a very different environment coming back from that high stress or trauma situation, and it doesn't matter what that was for you. It applies to everybody, right? Like it's more so like the extreme in the military, but in any aspect of life, if you're coming out of a domestic violence, relationship, if you're coming out of a abusive relationship, if you're coming from an abusive job place, whatever it looks like for you, you have to rebalance and actually find who you are again in all of that.
What's interesting, I'll say it like this, is if you get out of the military and you feel estranged from the civilian world and you're trying to integrate back in, and you say, well, I just can't fit into the civilian world. I don't belong here. But you're not gonna go back to the military because you crave it to the idea of normalcy and familiarity, but you hated it. So now it's like, I don't belong in the military world. I don't belong in the civilian world. Where do I go? And then a lot of people end up taking their lives because that's that in between plane. And so I think it's, you know, my biggest issue is the military can be set up for an amazing lifestyle for people, but there's so much blue and red tape and all kinds of different tapes, that get in the way of that. The biggest thing that always upsets me, and maybe you've seen this as patterns on your show, is that all the veterans, a lot of them complain about the same stuff. Back from the Vietnam veterans to people like me who were recently, just got out of the service, we all have the same complaints, which means it's the same stuff that's been happening for decades. And it's such a big organization that is hard to change because of the size of it and because it does follow. I think having Christopher Brewer on my show really changed my perspective on the military because he said, Mr. Whiskey, the military kind of goes in 4-year cycles, sometimes 8-year cycles. And what he means by that is it follows politics. Politics follow elections. And so the military is kind of in this constant up and down of it's doing all this Democratic stuff and it's doing all this Republican stuff and it's kind of tossing its people back and forth. That's why a lot of people end up getting out is because there's so much almost it's just like a lot of I just had to call it BS, I guess. I don't have I can't think of a good word. Hogwash.
Politics?
It's a lot of hogwash. Politics, yeah. I mean, politics and BS might be synonymous, at least here in America, but
I think it's
it's
everywhere.
ridiculous. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh,
And
well,
it's a shame.
I guess it makes it harder to just step into a role when it's all the bureaucratic red tape that always comes in there. And even I experience this, it's in any role that kind of has a governing body, right? Like it's constantly like, well, hang on a minute, I'm doing my job. Why are you questioning how I'm doing my job? And why all of a
Mhm.
sudden are you telling us to do the job differently? So even I had a coaching client today, and she said for no reason they changed. She was teaching students, and she said, for some reason now I'm not called a clinical educator anymore. I'm a practice educator. And she's like, I have been a clinical educator for 20 years. Why all of a sudden do I have to change to a practice educator? Because
Right,
someone decided that it had to be a different title. So it makes no sense whatsoever. It's just some sort of bureaucratic thing. And it happens all the time. Like I used to work a lot with we called it docs here, like foster kids or people in extra care and things like that. And I remember it went through this one period, and like I think I was my second year working, and they had that many name changes, but then they wouldn't pay you if you put the wrong name on the invoice. And it's like, but I can't keep up. You were this last week. They're like, oh yeah, we
right,
know. You just have to change it to this week. And I'm like, I just want you to pay me for goodness sake. Like you're still the same department. You just, yeah, it was crazy. It was like 3 or 4 name changes. And like you said, it was all that bureaucratic things coming through, and it was all the, it was just all this
right.
red
And
tape. Yeah, yeah,
they focus on so much, like, public front and then don't
mhm,
take care of the inner workings, I find, it's a lot of this
correct,
and that, so much
correct.
attention to detail on things that don't matter, and then the things that do matter are kinda, like, brushed aside, and it's oftentimes, it feels like in the military, I don't know if I know a veteran who would disagree, is one of those places where it feels like everyone is out to get you every day. It's like no matter what you do, it's like you're just wrong. You're always wrong, for no reason. Sometimes it's political reasons, sometimes it's the chief in charge of you hates his life because they ruined his life, or sometimes it's just because you get bad coworkers, but it's like somehow you're always wrong. And we have a saying in the Navy, it's probably in the military in general, which is, "No, that makes too much sense," or "No, because that would be too logical." So if it contradicts common sense, then it's military grade, is kind of what we say. Because we'll say XYZ would make so much sense and everyone could have an easy life and get the job done. And they'll say, actually, we're going to do, ABC, you know, LKJ, like just random, and actually we're gonna make this thing that could be done, in an hour with 10 men. We're gonna make it 100-man project for like 5 hours. It's like it's ridiculous, and the issue is too, anyone who wants to make a change in politics, there's so many people that are contradicting you and fighting against you. And then by the time you have enough power to make any change, you're getting out of office. And then at least here in America, I'm not sure about the term cycles in Australia, but it's almost as if everything is like 10, 20 years behind, because of the way everything is staggered. So it's just very delayed. And, there's not a lot of young people in politics either, just because of the age requirements. And I don't know if we'll ever see those change or not, where younger people will have more power in America or in other countries. I feel like we're on this lag cycle.
It's so interesting because I was at this talk, and he was First Nations Australian. So people still call them Aboriginal, but they prefer First Nations. Anyway, and he was saying they actually surveyed all the people in Parliament. We have a Parliament here. And the majority were white Anglo-Saxon men, where when you actually look up at the demographics of Australia, it's actually incredibly multicultural. And he's like, why isn't there a representative for every kind of culture, like covered in that? You know, it was really interesting when he said he sat down and he did this. He's a very intelligent man. He sat down and did all the statistics, and he's like, there's actually not fair representation for the people here. And then I'm also part of a human rights group, and we've been vetoing a lot of the bills trying to like get put through that take away human rights. And it was actually appalling to me that they had this thing called a Guillotine Act. So the Guillotine Act, what they do is in this one day in Parliament, they'll set like all these bills through. The politicians don't even read them properly. They have like a brief summary and they just vote yes or no. And I was like, and the things that got through on this day were appalling, like absolutely appalling. Like they were taking away people's choice of how they die when they're older. They were taking away people's ability to go online without having to provide like digital ID, like all these things like that. It was really insane. And again, like you said, it's this misrepresentation. It's this, misalignment between what people actually want and what the politicians are voting for. And a lot of the time, then they'll sugarcoat it as something else. So, one of the bills that got through was something called the Under 16s bill. And everyone thought it was to stop people under 16 going on social media. What it actually was a digital ID bill. So everyone has to now upload a picture of themselves to even go on YouTube and things like that. And it's really, and they're now extending it to like if you want to use Apple Maps, you know, you have to upload it, your face. And it's like, wow, this is really concerning, you know, but people don't, because they sugarcoated it as something else, it was, you know, misaligned and misused. So it's really like exactly like you said, it's this bureaucratic front, but they're not actually allowing people to do what they need to do or allow jobs to happen that they're meant to happen, or they're just doing their own agenda and don't really care about anything else because it's misrepresenting what people want.
Right, and it's almost outdated because when parliaments and democracies were first around, the population of the countries and the way the towns were set up, you could get most of the people in the Congress building to talk about everything. Like you look at America and 13 colonies. I mean, you could fit you could get a majority of representation there. The issue is now you have so many people in America or Australia, wherever it is, whose opinions aren't being heard, like you said. And it's like I feel like we have the technology now, and not everyone has means to access to technology, but like where voting could be open to every, eligible adult, where we have a guillotine day in America where it's not just Congress. It's every American citizen get on your laptop right now. Today's voting day, and everyone is going to get to review these bills. Everyone in America who is eligible to vote, whatever it is, you're going to have means of access to read these bills and vote yay or nay. And then based on what a majority of America wants, not a majority of Congress or a couple, senators or governors or whoever it is, will take action. That's kind of the system we need set up now to actually represent America. Because again, it's like, some of these states have one or two, men or women representing the entire state. And it's like, I don't know these people. It's it's like you said, and it's often very skewed one way or another. And at least America, we're so divided, left and right. And it's like left no room for in between or anywhere else. And it's become worse and worse and worse.
It's funny because, you know, if you go far enough left, you're right. If you go far enough right, you're left anyway. So it's really interesting. Like,
Yeah.
um, to me, like people are like, who are you voting for? And I'm like, they're just as bad as each other. I'm like, nobody. Like, you know, it's really It's really interesting when you sit back and you start to look at it all and pull it apart from a deeper level. But I feel to ask you, Mr. Whiskey, what can people expect if they listen to your podcast? What will they get? Because I know this has been a very serious conversation. Let's
Oh, for
change it up.
sure. Yeah. Well, I do have a serious show, but it depends on the episode. So there's plenty of episodes where, me and my chihuahua are just hanging out. Well, she's in every episode, she sits on my lap, but no, I have it set up. I really like my website. I made it, so obviously I'm biased, but I love my website because I've designed it where it's very easy to navigate, in my opinion. So what I mean by that is all the episodes are categorized. So if you're coming to my show, you can find what category best suits you. And those are suicide prevention, addiction recovery prevention. That's addiction as in gambling, pornography, alcohol, drugs. I have sleeping health, I have women's health, men's health, I have career, finances, mentorship, parenting, relationships, dating. I like to cover a bit of everything. I'm at the point now where I have a lot of guests reach out every day about being on the show, and if it's something that can help someone improve their life, that's kind of the criteria. So it's pretty easy criteria to meet. So long as, I find it to be genuine and, actual content that'll work and help people, And so my show, is kind of like you go there and you find what you need. You can get something from every episode, of course. Every episode has different insights. They may not be entirely impactful for you based on where you're at in life or who you are, but you can still take something away. The biggest thing, like I have all my guests and all their information because the idea is that through this, my company and show is a resource hub. So, there's a
Yeah.
lot of great resources that go into some very niche topics or some very different types of healing. I'm sure, through your show, you've discovered a lot of ways of healing that you didn't know exist, like a lot, you know.
100%.
So there's
Yeah,
for
and
sure.
I
And
feel
so,
yeah, and I love that you've created it as, like, kind of almost like a resource hub, right? Where it's like you've created a network from all the people that you've brought on so that they can connect, with other people, and I love doing that with people as well. Even I had a guest the other night, and I was like, "Hey, you can help one of my clients." And she's like, "Really?" I was like, "Oh, yeah, 100%." And I love connecting people. That's part of why I do this as well.
oh yeah, the networking and community part is amazing. Like I said, Pete is who connected you and I, right? So it's amazing. I do that all the time. I try to connect guests with other people and other hosts, and even for non-podcasting stuff, like you said, for different types of healing. I love having all this knowledge in the back of my head. So when I meet people in the real world, I call it podcasting as the fake world in the real world. When I'm out and about and not podcasting, I find myself podcasting just without the microphone to, involuntary strangers I find, at bars and other places. And it's like, hey, here's this, thing that can help addiction recovery. But usually I don't just give
At the bar,
unwarranted
I love
advice.
that.
I mean, yeah, I mean, yeah, that's well the best place to find them. I should just stand in front of the liquor store with my business card, and be like, "Hey," but
But then
it's
but then the irony of that's your Mr. Whiskey.
yeah, yeah, it is ironic. A lot of guests who come on my show who were former addicts are like, "Mr. Whiskey, haven't talked to you in 30 years in, 120 AA meetings," or whatever it'll be, so it's funny. But yeah, it is a bit ironic. I do find it funny, it's just the way everything lines up, in life, and, it's like it's funny. I kinda liken myself to Batman. It's like, people forget that he was afraid of bats, and he became Batman, and I'm not afraid of whiskey. Whiskey should be afraid of me, but, I would say, it's ironic that I work in addiction recovery. Yeah, I'm Mr. Whiskey, like, that kind of energy, but it's just great having all this information because you never know where your path is gonna line up with someone, and you'll end up knowing something that can help change your life. Like, my show started from a single conversation, so I know for a fact how much impact a single conversation can have. I'm sure we've all had a single conversation that changed our lives. probably more than once. We probably had a lot of different one conversation moments that really changed everything. And so being able to have all this knowledge from my show, whether it's a person or a resource or a technique that changes their life in an impactful way, it's really amazing. It's really humbling and mind blowing to think that like you said, that what someone in another country said on my show, months or years ago, helped change their life months or years in the future from now on a totally different part of the planet, in a totally different culture. Like, it's that online human connection aspect is insane.
Yeah, and I feel that power of connection is such an important quality to remember as a human because we're not meant to do this alone. And I feel that that's such a blessing that came out of COVID because people are more accepting and more willing to research, like reach out to people across the globe. And I know I have clients in America, which I probably wouldn't have had, if the world didn't lock down and we had to find other ways to communicate because in the end, as human beings, we always want to connect with other people.
Yeah, yeah. It depends on the day. I was gonna say depends on the day. Depends on the day and where I'm at. But yeah, no, it's been a real blessing to run the show, and it's led me to do so much that I never expected. If like thinking about wee little lad version of me telling him like, hey, we're gonna do stand-up comedy one day. He's gonna be like, what? I never expected that. It came about because of podcasting put me in a place where like, hey, we're doing comedy now on stage, it's happening. I ended up working with pregnant women. I have a whole support guide on my website specifically for pregnant women to navigate resources about money and faith and health and fitness and all that stuff. And like, I haven't always had such a passion for pregnant women as I do now, which kind of just happened through podcasting. I said, hey, for Mother's Day, I want to do something a little different, and I made an episode that ended up turning into a guide that ended up becoming, something that is still worked on. I've been able to be a co-author in a lot of books that I never expected. Like, I've gone and traveled to so many places because other than the military, I had never traveled before really. So podcasting has taken me to Florida, to Chicago, to Texas, to all over Georgia, to all the way to other countries. And it's just been amazing. And it's something that just continually builds on itself every day, making more connections, getting more resources. It's like a never ending, just self, perpetuating thing. And it's, self perpetuating as long as I show up, and do my job and meet people. But even then, like I could take a break from podcasting for days or weeks, and I still get emails every day from people who want to be on the show or from people who, have feedback for this episode or that. So it's really an awesome thing.
Yeah, which is so beautiful. I love that. I just love how that evolved for you. And sometimes, when you are living your soul purpose or your life purpose and things just align right. And it's just like a domino effect. It's like, oh, because I did this and this, and then this happened, and this happened, and this happened. And then you're like,
Yeah.
yeah, this is really cool.
Never
And
expected to be a podcaster. I don't think most podcasters ever expect that.
no, no, it's funny because I started my podcast because I had to blow open my throat chakra. So like my energy of like speaking out and sharing more with the world. And so I did. And I started a podcast and people were like, hey, how'd you get this person as a guest on your show? And I said, I just asked. I was like, and they're like,
Yeah.
oh, you just asked? I was like, yeah, I just asked, and then it just evolved and evolved. And now it's more, I love doing it because I get to meet people like yourself and collaborate with people and see where that goes. So, as long as you stay with that involvement and see where it goes, it can be really fun too.
It
Um,
it is strange to just ask people. I've asked people at bars, I what's funny was I was at a bar and I met two people who work in addiction treatment, were sitting next to me having a drink. So they were like, "Oh, what do you do?" I ended up talking about how I do addiction recovery on my podcast. They're like, "Oh, wow, we're addiction treatment people." And I was like, No one has to know how we met. No one has to know that we all met at the bar, drinking, talking about people who had drinking issues. But I've
That's
reached out to random people on Instagram and Facebook, and sometimes I just bump into people at a gas station, and they, I don't know, don't go
I
talking to strangers. That's not what I'm saying. Be careful, but
No, I talk to strangers every day. It's like part of what I do. It's how
yeah.
I met some of my guests, but also one of the funniest meets I think was, oh, I was next to someone in a breathwork session, and we were walking out, and I said, "Hey, what do you do?" And then she started sharing what she did, and she was so passionate about it. I said, "Do you want to come on my podcast?" She's like, "Okay." So I was like, "Great, let's have a chat about corporate governance."
Wow.
So it's really it's really fun when you do that. But even just by being curious about people, you can learn so much about them, right? I think that's the fun of it too.
Yeah, and podcasting gives you the skills over time through, repetition, just how to talk to people,
Yep.
like so many people were like, Mr. Whiskey, how do you just do this in social situations? You're like, you're just talking to everyone and you're so relaxed about it. And I'm like, yeah, it was podcasting. I grew up, not really allowed to leave the house, not allowed to really talk to anyone. I could have been introverted hermit for life, and I think podcasting really changed that. And it starts off easy because it's the virtual stuff, which for some people can be even more intimidating than in person. But when I first started my show, it was empty screen, and we were audio only, right? So it was easy not having to look at people and stuff like that. And now obviously, I've branched out a lot more, but yeah, it becomes easy, and I think it's a skill that's being really lost among the younger generations. I've done a lot of episodes on how AI and social media are affecting
Mm,
social skills and just the
mm.
change of the family dynamic and family socialization and the way workplaces are, and it's an important skill to have. And the amount of young people who are, well, the amount of people in general afraid of public speaking, of public reading, of socializing. I mean, most of the addictions formed in people who have guested on my show was because of social anxiety, need to fit in, or needed
Yeah.
drugs or alcohol to be able to talk to people. And it's
Mm.
like, it's insane that the world has become so hateful and violent and anxious and crazy and estranged that people need to do drugs and alcohol to talk to one another. I mean, I feel like that's a dystopia book that someone would have, made 100, 200 years ago. Like, imagine this, a society where everyone has to take drugs and alcohol to talk to one another. And that's what we're living in. Isn't that crazy? When you say it like that, it just sounds insane to me.
Yeah, and I guess it's because people don't know how to live authentically either. Like we're so good at putting
Mm.
masks on and showing up with how everyone else expects us to show up, and then we forget to actually strip that off and show up how we need to show up as well. So I find that contrast really interesting. But as we finish our time together, Mr. Whiskey, I ask guests that come on the show, if you could heal or change something in the world, what would it be?
Oh, wow. I wasn't ready for this question. I didn't. I listened to a couple episodes of your show, but not all the way. I want to get like a little variety pack, like a sampler appetizer. So I kind of like took a nibble of a couple different episodes. I could heal one thing. You know, there's so many. I think the biggest upset lately that has been on my mind because of the pregnancy work is that the number one cause of abortion is finances. And to me, to see there are people who are billionaires, there are billions of dollars of government money going to different projects, yet women are being forced to kill their children because of a lack of financial resources or a fear of financial instability or not being able to give the child a proper life. So they terminate the life. To me, that is the saddest thing, that we have so much money in the world. We have so many resources, yet they're not distributed fairly. They're just like skewed, and the amount
Mm.
of financial spending of the government, and I can only speak on America, but I'm sure other countries seem to be a little bit better about it in some aspects. the amount of money that goes into projects that are scrapped or not beneficial, or the amount of money like, sent in for aid, you look at how many times that money could have been used to end all homelessness in America, to take care of all the disabled in America, to help support all the women, even temporarily, in a financial hardship so that they don't have to get an abortion. It's truly heartbreaking to see how much money I feel like is or hoarded wasted or hoarded. It's just those are the two kind of ways I see money being used in government by rich people. And that gets into a whole controversy of, should the rich keep money for themselves or should they help others? As a whole morality thing. But at the end of the day, at least government wise, the fact that they have money to prevent, all these lives being taken, and they're not using it to do so, it's sickening. I think in general, you look that is just a byproduct of bystanderism, and if you look at a lot of conflicts around the globe, in every country, it's the product of bystanderism. You mentioned earlier isolation and community, and I think not only are we isolated individually so much nowadays, but as countries as well, as states as well. Everything comes down to, you know, so localized, it becomes state versus state or district versus district, county versus county, country versus country, and we lose that humanitarian aspect. So if everyone would stop being a bystander and had power to do something and chose to do it, I think a lot of issues would be fixed. I think poverty, hunger, everything, all these global issues and all these localized issues, it all comes down to people not doing something or not being able to because of the people who are wasting or hoarding all the resources.
Yeah, and it's really interesting, hey, because, I always say, what would I do if I had, endless amount of money or resources? And it's funny because, like, once I'd make sure we're okay, because you need to look after
Yeah.
yourself. And this is a thing people are like, "Oh, no, you wouldn't do that." I'm like, "No, you do. You need to make sure you're okay." But then whatever is overflowing, then you put it back into projects that support people, right? Like whether it's building eco housing, whether it's, like you said, redistributing wealth, whether it's helping people with their health, whatever it might be. But, that's the whole idea of being able to reposition those resources so that they are benefiting everybody rather than just a select few, So, and it's not about being money is evil or being rich is bad. It's about how do those people put back and serve the world in such a powerful way that it benefits all of humanity. Yeah. Yeah.
I agree 100%, and it comes down to, we all have a choice whether we help one another or not. And it's taking that action or not that really is what changes everything.
100%. My saying that I wake up every day is be the change that you want to see in the world. Yeah. So, if you want to see a change, you start being that change. It's so powerful. And it can be as simple as just holding the door open for somebody or, smiling or sharing a compliment, this whole acts of kindness. No, just be kind. Just be kind and show up and show with your actions that you are actually a caring person or that you're a human. And we get it. Not every day you can show up that way. Like you said, some days you don't want to talk to people at all. And that's fine. That's
Yeah.
part of being human too. you know, and then they're the days that you want other people to give that love that you share with them, like the kindness that you share with them back to you because you just need some pick
Yeah.
me ups that day. Um,
Yeah.
and
Well,
how,
and
sorry,
interesting. I was gonna say, interestingly enough, as a podcaster, even on the days I don't want to talk to people, I have to talk to people because they scheduled, and I can't just reschedule them. I mean, I could, but I'm not that kind of person. But and it's interesting because on some of the days where I really don't want to talk to people, I end up having amazing conversations that are so
mhm,
impactful. And it
mhm,
kind of, goes to show that like always show up, even when you don't want to, because you never know who you're going to meet or what's going to happen. And even on your worst days, there are opportunities for some really amazing things to happen, and the only thing blocking it is you. So I think always push through, always show up.
Yeah, 100%. And if people want to listen to your show or connect with you, Mr. Whiskey, how can they find you?
For sure. So coupleonukes.com. I always put that forward because my website has everything, books, podcasts, the episodes categorized, the guests categorized, every show I've been on. So I always put that forward, coupleonukes.com. That's nukes, Nukes, and couple common spelling, and then letter O. So coupleonukes.com. You can find a ton of information. Even if you don't listen to my show, just combing through the guests and their resources and the different topics and everything, I think is extremely beneficial.
Beautiful. And I'll make sure to put that in the show notes as well so everyone can come and find you. But a big thank you for being on the show, Mr. Whiskey, and also how you created the story of your podcast and how you share that with the world now. It's really beautiful. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Right. Thank you for listening to Willow Healing Matters, the podcast. We have so much love and gratitude that you have taken the time out of your day to empower you on your healing journey. The views shared by the person being interviewed might not necessarily reflect that of the host and should be used at your own discernment. Trust what resonates for you and follow your heart and soul guidance. If you have any underlying medical conditions or mental health issues, please consult with your healthcare provider before pursuing any of the recommendations. Likewise, you can always contact the person being interviewed to find out more information. This can be found in the show notes. Remember to activate, align, heal, empower, and find love in everything that you do.